Welcome to 3 a.m. Pillow Talk. I'm taking my leg off real quick. This is going to be 25 lessons I've learned in 2025, though I didn't count them. It's very haphazardly put together. So I am not 100% sure there's going to be 25 of them. But I'm going to start off with some personal lessons I've learned, and hopefully it helps somebody. Probably it won't because some of these are very specific. So, first thing I learned is that amputees are assholes. And I'm an amputee, but I do not like amputees. I only identify with two-legged people. There seems to be this weird competition with amputees, and I'm not sure what that is. And I learned this years ago, but it kind of got brought back up um, this last year. In that everyone's very supportive, but everyone wants to be the best amputee, and so that was really weird to me. I've never got along with amputees. I think they're assholes. So that's what I want to start this off with. And then I guess I can go ahead and tie that into what it's like to be an amputee, what it's like to be missing a leg. So, first of all, I was weird about, I've always had social anxiety. Like, that's just been a thing that I've had my whole life. I've learned to manage it pretty effectively by saying dumb things in inappropriate situations. And then people just think I'm funny and they don't understand it's pure social anxiety. But where was I going with that? Yeah. So I have learned that everybody wants to be the amputee's friend. Okay. First of all, you go to a workplace where it's labor work, or you go to a gym, people are like, oh, he's got so much heart. Oh, look at him go. And then that slowly turns into, oh, look at him go. And then it's a silent competition. And then they start hating on the amputee. So I've learned that. That's been a weird thing. I don't know if that's with everybody, or maybe that's me, or maybe that's my general appearance also, because I also have a general appearance that is slightly outside the lines. Okay. So I've put together a bunch of facts I've learned. And when I was in college, my favorite freaking class was philosophy. And I loved that class, my favorite class. I looked forward to it all the time. And um, and they were doing this thing where you had to come up with a movie and you had to do a presentation in class. And so people were like, come on, movies, they're doing presentations. And I literally waited till the last day to where it was my turn to do the the presentation in front of the class, and I freaking dropped out of philosophy until just the morning. It was my turn to do. So that's how bad my social anxiety has always been. Um, but that brings me into, there's a famous 17th century philosopher named John Locke who described our mind as, and this is going to kind of lead into what this episode is sort of going to be about, which is all very vague talk. I just realized because none of this is scripted and I don't know how to edit yet, or probably ever. So he described our mind as a white piece of paper being devoid of all character or ideas. So what he thought of, which is kind of, if you think about that and you think about how our nervous system is, that's kind of way ahead of his time. And it's interesting because with philosophy, there are no answers, only questions. So what he said was you have like a blank slate when you're born, and as you gather experiences, your slate gets colored in with those experiences, and you learn to look at the world through those experiences. Okay, well, I learned the other day that you have like 10 billion more neurons that go from your brain to your eyes than your eyes to your brain. So the bulk of the information and the way we perceive the outside world is from our brain and not our eyes. So there's a saying I heard. What was it? It was, we're not, and this is, I have to give this, I saw this on a podcast. Connor Beaton does Man Talk, and I like that podcast. But he said at one point, he said, we do not actually encounter the world. We're only experiencing our nervous system. So I think that I think subconscious, and there's another saying now, and this is Carl Jung, which I love Carl Jung. I love Nietzsche. Carl Jung says, until you make the subconscious conscious, it will, and don't quote me exactly, it will guide your life and you will call it fate. So I think a lot of times, my buddy one time said, an old buddy said that we're not driving our own cars. Or we drive our own cars, but we're not building the roads that they're driven on. So I think a lot of us make decisions out of emotion, and and if you think about this, all right, let's lead into this a different way. So look at commercials. Look at everything in life. Look how they sell cars. It's all emotion. Very few logical things are spoken about in commercials. It's all visuals. It's all visuals, and it's meant to speak to your emotion. So as emotional creatures, most of our decisions are based on emotion. And then we try to, let me see, I got this written down. So most of our emotions are based on, most of our decisions are based on emotion. And then we try to rationalize the emotion, the decision we based on an emotion, whatever emotion we're going through, with logic. So to circle back to experiencing the world through our nervous systems and the way our eyes and our brains work, our brains are very, I spoke about this in a short video the other day. Our brains are very, very efficient, and the most efficient running system for our brain is to predict. So our brains are literally predicting what we're seeing and predicting an outcome of what we see. And then we correct it based on whether that prediction was right or not, which that's, ever since I heard that was really interesting to me. All right, some of the lessons I've learned, some of the things I've heard, and then we'll go into some of the more personal lessons I've learned, because my year has been sort of like a bell curve. I've had an interesting year, much better than 2024, not as good as 2026 is going to be, because that's how we roll. So this is one of the things I learned. Self-esteem, and this one really, really, I like this. Self-esteem is a reputation you have with yourself, whether you're living up to a code you believe in or not. So I said this early on in doing these podcasts, that what if we let ourselves down all the time? What if a friend, right? What if a friend, how many promises have you made to yourself to quit drinking, to quit smoking, to wake up on time, to quit hitting the snooze button, whatever thing that goes through your brain? How many times have you said, you said, I'm going to quit that, and then you don't? Well, what if you had a friend who said, let's go out to lunch at 1 o'clock? And you're like, all right. and you go there and he stands you up. So you're like, all right, he stood me up, so you eat lunch. And a couple days later, he's like, hey, bro, I'm sorry about that. I apologize. I got tied up in something. Let's eat lunch. Let's go to lunch at 1 today. And you're like, okay. He lets you down again. Well, are you gonna trust him? So what are we doing with ourselves? So how many times do we let ourselves down? Making in the same way, saying, you know what, I'm gonna do this, or I'm going to wake up at this certain time, and I'm going to work out, or I'm going to change this facet of my life, whatever facet it is that you are struggling with, and not carry through with that. That is going to directly affect your self confidence and your self esteem and your relationship with yourself. Because you're not going to have a good relationship with another person who keeps doing that to you. How do you expect to have a good relationship with yourself? Okay. So I heard a saying that all anxiety, and this came from a Harvard professor, I don't remember which one. Um, all anxiety is separation anxiety, right? It's all just separation anxiety. Okay. So sure, we can get separation anxiety from our loved ones, but also I believe some of that separation anxiety is separating from ourselves. So again, and I've been a big believer in this in romantic relationships, because I like to focus this podcast mainly on romantic relationships, masculine, feminine energy. If you have a code you believe in, or if you do something, you see this double-sided thing in relationships all the time, right? You don't want them to cheat on you. You don't want them to lie to you. You don't want them to be shady, yet you're doing that. I think that's a separation from yourself, because that's a separation from what you believe in and what you want. And that's going to create unnecessary anxiety in your life. And on the back end of that, I would just like to add anxiety is an evolutionary trait. Okay. We used to have to. So I guess there may be several different. While I get into this, and I'm kind of arguing with myself and discussing this with myself and talking about it with y'all, there may be different kinds of anxiety, right? Because I also learned that from an evolutionary perspective, okay, we had to watch our surroundings. In fact, you know what? This probably does tie in perfectly. So we had to watch our surroundings all the time to stay alive. The world was dangerous. Our brains were constantly busy making sure we weren't getting eaten, making sure we were good with the tribe. So you get kicked out of the tribe, you die. You had to worry about what the tribe thought of you, which can go into this cult mentality thing that we still carry evolutionary wise. You see that in politics, you see that in religion. So the world used to be far more dangerous. I don't think anxiety was a problem back then. I think now our brain just doesn't know what to do with that extra energy, and it turns against us. But I don't think I'm a big believer in not medicating your anxiety. I understand. I don't know. I'm not a psychiatrist. I'm not a psychologist. I'm not a mental health professional. I'm just a guy who's been through things. But I don't believe in necessarily medicating your anxiety, because I think there are better ways to deal with it as a man. Anyways, I think action. Right. So let's say you're in the desert. You're in the middle of the desert. Because anxiety is basically unpredictable future. All right. So we don't know what's coming next. All right. Which this all has to tie in somehow. Um. So I think action, a lot of times, if you're stuck in the desert, you don't know the direction to go, and then you all of a sudden you say, I'm going west. It's going to be west. I'm going to run into something going west and save my life. that's going to take away 90% of your anxiety because you just made a decision and you started action. All right, let's get off anxiety for a minute. Probably return to the nervous system. So, following that, let's circle back to the, the brain sending more information to the eyes than the eyes to the brain. Um, we we don't. I think trauma can get in the way of that prediction process. And I see it all the time. And I've dealt with a lot of trauma this year, both on my end and in people I love. And I think some people get stuck in trauma. And sometimes maybe we're stuck reacting to the world based on our trauma, which does seed itself in our nervous systems. And we get stuck reacting to the world based on that without even knowing. So I think a lot of that has to be a lot of self reflection and a lot of sitting with yourself and really kind of figuring out, you can, yeah, just kind of just figuring out what you're dealing with, how you look at the world, why you're looking at the world. If you get something stuck in your head, I said this in a short video the other day, okay? Because a lot of trauma will get stuck and it'll cycle in your head and you'll start predicting outcomes and the trauma gets in the way of you actually correcting that wrong prediction. Okay. So it gets stuck in your head. I think a good way to think about to look at maybe correcting that, which I'm working on right now, um, is writing it down. If you get something stuck in your head, whether it's a scenario, because we all go through scenarios, and some of us are worse than others. Some of us have slower serotonin uptakes, okay, or receptors damaged, or maybe not even damaged. They just don't receive the serotonin as much. Um, or a slower drip. One of those things. Like I said, I'm not a neuroscientist. I think a lot of times, if you write down whatever intrusive thought or whatever you have cycling through your head, and you write it down, and then maybe wait a day or two and look at it. I think that can show a lot of times that can show you where your trauma lies, right? So I do a journal, and this is actually really interesting. So I do a journal. I've been journaling for about the last year and a half, and I went through. So I'll put the date, and I'll just journal whatever I'm dealing with, whatever I'm feeling. And I used to do it at night, used to do it in the morning. I figured out I think morning time is the best time. I drink my coffee and I get some reflection in. And I went through my journal, and it hasn't changed. The stuff I worry about or the stuff I deal with has not changed in a year and a half of journaling. So every entry was basically had the same context to it. And that context, more times than not, was self doubt. So I'm on here and I look really freaking confident. And I go out there and I do what I do and I confidently do what I do. And I hit the gym and I do that with confidence. And a lot of people mistake that for arrogance, but I do it with confidence. And but deep down, it seems like I'm dealing with a lot of self doubt. So I think that is a very, very good reason to have people in your life outside of that sphere, outside of work, outside of the gym, outside of those places where you go and you're confident, you're a fucking man about it, and you're killing it, and you're doing your shit. And I think normally that's going to be a supportive spouse, I think generally that is the biggest case for a soft spot to land and a supportive spouse, because you need to be able to communicate those self doubts as a man. You can't let those swim around in your head because they're going to affect your actions. And I think a lot of us men have a bad relationship with emotions and emotional outlets. And the world has also given us sort of a bad, the world has also sort of given us a bad relationship with our emotions. Don't be loud, don't get angry, toxic masculinity. But the problem with men is men actually feel very deeply. We feel very deeply. Our emotions run very deep. When they come out, they can come out scary. They don't come out like a woman's emotions. I've dealt with this in my relationship because my tone of voice or the way I talk when I'm going through something changes. So as a man, I think we need to become a little bit more comfortable with our emotions and not let anger be our first reaction. Because as a man, anger is going to be your first reaction, which brings me into this. Okay, for a quick side note over here, we're going to do a quick side note. Most of the time, if a man is angry, it's going to be because a boundary was not put in place properly or it was crossed. Okay, but we can also get embarrassed, and our go-to could be anger because we don't want to have to feel embarrassment because that would signal weakness. We could feel insecure about something, and our go-to could be anger because we don't want to have to express or deal with the fact that we're feeling insecure or incompetent at something, especially incompetence. As men, we do not want, we need to be competent at everything. We do not like to feel incompetent. So I think I'm going to be doing a lot of emotion work, I think, in 2026. I was driving the other day, and I noticed I stifle them. I'm just a brick wall. And I don't think that's healthy because they could come out in different ways, whether it's the way I deal with people or anything. They could come out in my relationship, the way I deal with my woman. It could come out with the way I deal in public. And I'm already perceived a certain way. I'm going to be perceived a certain way. It seems that will never be beat. That's going to be how people perceive me, no matter how charismatic I make myself. So that's something I think I'm going to do in 2026 is get into some emotion work and really dig deep into how to sit with your emotions because they all start in your body. All your emotions start in your body. And kind of notice when something is coming up and dealing with it more appropriately than just stifling it, right? Off emotions. And I'm going to look at my piece of paper because I don't talk my way into, I don't know what I'm talking about right now. Competency. We just mentioned competency. So just because there's a saying that just because he can carry it does not mean the weight is not heavy. Okay, so there are a lot of men out there carrying a whole lot of weight, and just because you are carrying it does not mean that it's not heavy, which then people don't people are going to be less likely to hear your vulnerabilities because you seem like a rock, right? So you're carrying that weight. People are going to be less likely to be receptive. That maybe, you're just like, I need to talk, I need to show some vulnerability, which leads into something I call that's a competency curse. All right. We're going to call that the competency curse. And then which ties right in with the masculinity paradox of vulnerability. All right, so I get on here and I'm tattooed up, I have facial hair, I've got some muscles, I talk a certain way, I carry myself a certain way. If I was to shed some tears right now, it would be looked at as decently attractive. It would be like, well, look at that. Like you see that with a lot of people that if they've built themselves up to a certain status or if they look a certain way and they look more masculine, vulnerability is received a lot better. But if I was on here and I didn't look the way I look and I was maybe wearing a turtleneck and just this kind of small stature guy and I don't carry myself so well, that vulnerability would be looked at as weakness and it would turn people off. So I think that's kind of paradoxical. Oh, and something I learned this year, took completely off topic, that there are more daily weed smokers than daily drinkers. Now, personally, I don't know, which is cool. That's weird, right? You'd have never thought that in the 80s and 90s when weed was so taboo, where you're smoking a marijuana cigarette and they called it dope. You might as well be doing heroin. Now we actually statistically have more daily weed smokers than drinkers, which is, I don't know. I still don't think smoking weed every day is good for you. I think there could be some medicinal benefits to smoking weed, but I still think it make you dumb. Because I used to smoke weed to go to sleep. I remember it dumbed my life down pretty well smoking weed every day. So I quit smoking altogether. All right, let's see what we got. Let's see what we got. Let's see what we got. Identity versus identifying. That's something I learned this year. Okay. So let's say I hit the gym religiously and I want to build my body up, right? Well, being a bodybuilder is not my identity, right? Being a handyman, I do a small handyman business. That's not my identity. And I think a lot of people look for identities outside of themselves. So whether you're not comfortable with yourself, or maybe it's a habit, or maybe there's something you're running from about yourself that you haven't sat with yet, because Carl Jung had the idea of the shadow self. I think so. Let's say I want to go be a firefighter, for instance, and I see these firefighters and they're rescuing people and they're climbing ladders. Well, that I can identify as a firefighter. I can identify as a bodybuilder. I can identify as a guy who fumbles sometimes his way through podcasts, but is too stubborn to stop. I can identify as I got a truck full of tools and I can go fix things, right? But that's not my identity, because you can't, that's not my identity. So I believe solely that your identity is what you do in the moment. Whatever you do in each moment, right? We all have a decision of what to do in each moment. And how you deal with that and what you do is your identity. It's who you are, because that's how you're reacting in that moment. So let's see. I think I have ran through everything I have haphazardly written down. Besides, I learned this. Okay, this is interesting, that most people focus more on what's missing in their lives than what they have in their life. Always chasing after the next thing. If I can just get this car, or if I can just make it to this level of whatever status you're trying to make it of. Like, I thought to myself, and back when I was young, because I'm an old man now, 250 pounds of muscle. That's good. Good right there. I hit 250, then it was like, well, you know what? Maybe just 275. Then I hit 275 and was like, you know what? Why don't I try for 300? So I think a lot of times we're missing out on the life that's happening around us and with us and within us because we're always focused on what is missing. And if we know that, if we have that information, maybe we can slow down, take a breath, and appreciate what we have. Appreciate what we do have. Appreciate the people in our lives better. And we still need to strive to be better. We still need to strive to rise in whichever hierarchy you're trying to rise in, whatever status you're trying to get to. We still need to do that. We don't want to be the Cheeto eating guy in front of the computer. But I think we do need, especially some of us insecure overachievers, I think sometimes we do need to just stop for a second and appreciate what's in front of us because you're missing life chasing the next thing. And I truly believe that. And that is going to wrap up. I think that's 25 things I've learned in 2025. Besides, I did learn, okay, this is kind of a life hack. Carry a bike pump in your car. I don't know why bike pump, because those other pumps. I don't know why I even said that. But I learned the other day you can pump up your freaking your if you got a slow leak in your car tire, you can literally hook a bike pump up to it and pump up your fucking car tire. But that's not even a life hack because they've got those boxes at Walmart where you just plug it in your car for $15 and it feels like a tire. But I did learn that useless information. So that is what I have. I hope y'all have a good day. I'm hoping to bring on a guest this weekend so y'all don't have to just stare at me and hear me ramble on. So looking for a guest for next weekend. I'm going to post that out there on social media, try to find a guest, and y'all have a good day. Have a good week coming up. It is going to be really cold here. There's an Arctic blast or something like that coming through, whatever that means. So the weather app told me. So I hope everyone has a good week. I hope everybody is able to slow down and appreciate what they do have in front of them. I hope if you're stuck in your head about something or your head is spinning about something, you're able to slow that down a little bit and get a better perspective on it if there are intrusive thoughts. I hope that we can all learn to sit with our emotions a little bit better and find somebody, because you need to find somebody that you can express those emotions to. It can't be done all by yourself. And I hope we all understand that our anxiety is not going to go away. There's You can take a pill, you can drink a liquor, you can drink some liquor, you can there are a million ways that people learn to not have to deal with their emotions and their anxiety. A lot of that's through porn or video games or substances. I hope that if you are going through some anxiety, that you take action. Because I think moving forward and taking action in one direction or the other is going to relieve a lot of that anxiety in your life. So, y'all have a good day. Have a good week.